Now, the Duval Rundown, driven by Jacksonville Chrysler Jeep Dodge Ram Westside, home of the lifetime warranty.
Good morning, happy Friday. Welcome to another edition of Duval Rundown. I'm Hayes Carline. Please be joined as always on Friday with Rick Ballou. You can hear Rick into the night. Rick, good morning. We got lots to get to, but before we get into the Jaguars and facing the Texans Sunday, I got to talk to the rock and roll hobnobber, the rock and roll bigwig. Give me the story. Ballou in the Sphere with the Eagles, backstage. Give us all the details. How was it?
It was fun. I believe you've seen the Eagles there. It's a great venue.
Yes.
I saw you two there a year and a half ago, but I'm pretty good friends with Derek Trucks and Susan Tedeschi. A couple of Friday nights ago after their show in St. Aug, I went backstage and Derek's like, we're going to now go to Las Vegas next week to go to the Jags game. I'm like, awesome. Well, let's hook up. And he's like, yeah, as a matter of fact, we're going to go to the Eagles. You want to go? And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. So we go, and he's known Joe Walsh since he was like 9 or 10 years of age. And he's playing in a big event next week in Wichita, Kansas that supports veterans. So we had an opportunity to go and meet Joe Walsh before the show. It was just amazing. I mean, he's exactly the way that you would expect him to be. There's no putting, himself into character once you get on stage. I mean, what you see with Joe Walsh is the way that he is. Now, granted, I only spent 15 minutes with him, but that appeared to be the way it was. And I asked Eric about it. He said, absolutely. I mean, he's always that way. So it was great. We stayed in James Dolan's suite, who owns the Knicks, and just a really good show. And, I had to call it kind of early right after the concert. I had to check back because I had to get up early the next morning and get ready for Jaguars football against the Raiders. But yes, it was a phenomenal time. Meeting Joe Walsh was absolutely about as cool as anything I've ever done. That's
awesome. What was it like backstage at the Sphere?
They all have individual rooms. I didn't understand it to be that way. I'm kind of old school, and we've seen concert footage for years where they're all kind of crowded in one room. And
interesting. So totally each guy had almost their own office, like Henley.
Absolutely.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Almost like a small apartment. He was watching the World Series. He had food and drinks all over the place, couch, chairs, bed, shower. I mean, just everything that, you would expect at a place like like the Sphere. So, yeah, it's a little bit different. I'm sure, if I asked him compared to when he started touring back with the James Gang and all the way through, the early years with the Eagles, where I'm sure they just kind of threw him in one room, things have absolutely changed for these rock and roll stars.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, great stuff. And obviously you had fantastic coverage of the victory over the Raiders. It was a great contingent of Jaguars fans. I thought, I just went as a fan, but we saw tons of Jaguar fans in our section and walking through the concourse of a fantastic stadium. What was it like from your vantage point up in the press box, and what stood out about obviously a gigantic win for the Jags?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, the fans really did their part. I'm sure this is one that they circled right when the schedule came out, and Jacksonville was very well represented. So that was encouraging. I thought the first 30 minutes of football was about as bad as anything I've seen, going back to maybe game 2 this year when Jacksonville faced Houston the first time. It was bad football. And, we talked about it last week. I thought the under was a sure thing. If you are a gambler, 6-3 at half, it looked like there's no way they were going to get to 44.5 points, and they did. To me, Hayes, this is very similar to the first couple of weeks of the year when we talked about it. This was absolutely a game that Jacksonville would have lost a year ago, or lost 2 years ago, or lost 3 years ago. So this is the 4th time this year, in my opinion, that they've won football games that they would have lost a year ago, yet this year's team has found a way to get out of there with a W.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, and it leads to a bigger, I think, storyline as we peek ahead towards Sunday's game in Houston, and that's the Jaguars have a difference maker at head coach now. I mean, which has not been the case for a while. And I mean, you can go back maybe all the way to Coughlin in terms of that, but I know the Jaguars have had some success here and there with some other guys, but boy, it really feels like Liam Cohen has a really strong pulse of his team in terms of what they do well and what they don't do well. And I thought he made a couple of decisions in this game strategically that really paid off. Number one, taking the ball to start overtime when he knew that all they were really going to be able to do was run it. So you didn't want to end up with what the Raiders ended up in, and the Raiders were a little better equipped to handle it. But you didn't want to be down 7 points with 3 minutes left on the clock when you know you really can't throw it with all the attrition you have. Just one example, but I think to your point, I think Liam Cohen is a big reason why they are having the success they are having in these close games.
You know, I did ask Liam Cohen right after the game that question about taking the ball, because if you looked at time of possession, if you looked at plays in the game, it was almost 2-1 time of possession for Jacksonville over Las Vegas. So I would have figured that the defense was fresh, the defense was rested, put them out there first, but he said, no way. I wanted the ball. I wanted to try to take the clock. He ran 10 plays. 9 of the 10 were rushing plays. You had 1 completion to Parker Washington. The rest, they ran the football. And it even goes down to the Trevor TD, which, you know, in the press box, some people were like, what's he doing? There's no way he called that play. That was a change by Trevor Lawrence calling his own number at the line of scrimmage. But, you know, I admire the fact that he tried to win the football game. And there's been other times around here where coaches would have gone in the other direction. Another thing I also really admire about Liam Cohen is yes, he's a player's coach, but I think he knows how to push buttons and when to push buttons. After the game, he came out and said, Trayvon Walker just can't do that. You cannot get ejected in a situation like that. Well, compare that to the way Doug Peterson handled Jarian Jones a year ago after the Trevor Lawrence concussion. I mean, Peterson was smug. Peterson was like, you know, I'm going to have to go talk with him. Where the whole world was like, what about the lack of retaliation? Where here it is a year later, and you've got Liam Cohen, who's like, you know, Trayvon Walker, when completely healthy, may be our best defensive player. You can't do that. And there's a total difference. And I think the players respect that in a much different league now where, you know, criticism can lead to guys just checking out or guys just, especially in college, just picking up their ball and going somewhere else. So I think that's also another factor that we've seen here that is totally different with Liam Cohen from what we saw here the last several years.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the win Sunday looks a little bit better in hindsight now. Friday morning, the Raiders played the Broncos incredibly tough last night in Denver. It was an ugly game. But the Raiders defense had to be gassed coming off playing basically a 70-minute football game against the Jaguars, turned around on a short week, went on the road against a very good team. And defensively, they were great last night. They didn't get much going offensively, but yeah, so that's that win looks, I think, a little bit better now, seeing how tough the Raiders hung with the Broncos last night, and what I think it was like 10-7, but it was a really, really low scoring game and a very tight game throughout. Huge game Sunday in Houston. Really, I think the biggest storyline on both sides is the attrition that both these teams are facing. Obviously, with Houston, they don't have CJ Stroud. I mean, that right there really is a challenge for a Texans offense that struggled all season, but they've got some other guys that are not practicing, at least to this point yet. We'll see if they go today. And on the Jaguar side, multiple key players that aren't practicing this week so far for them. How do you see this in terms of each side kind of having to get around a tough injury report?
Yeah, it's going to be really intriguing. And again, I think ugly football is probably going to be what Jaguar fans are going to get, and that's fine if you get out of there with a W. I mean, they're trying to sweep Houston for the first time since 2017, and I looked at all the injuries. Titus Howard may not be able to go offensively at right tackle for Houston. Key defensive players are out, although both linemen yesterday in Houston, both edge guys were upgraded to limited after not practicing on Wednesday. So yeah, it's a little bit encouraging there for Anderson and Autry. To me, you can look at everything, and right now it feels like Jordan Lewis isn't going to go. It feels like Ezra Cleveland's not going to go. It feels like Brian Thomas Jr. is not going to go. That could change this afternoon when we hear from Liam Cohen and the Friday injury report comes out. But I can't get over simply one thing. Davis Mills against Trevor Lawrence. Okay, that's where I'm stopping everything. The excuses, the injuries. Davis Mills against Trevor Lawrence. You've got to be kidding me here. Trevor Lawrence goes on the road and wins a football game in Houston. End of conversation. And I get it that this is the ultimate team game. I totally understand that. But this is your generational quarterback going up against the guy who was drafted the same year in the third round, got an opportunity to make more than 20 starts in Houston, failed. Now he's pushed in there because of an injury. That's what it comes down to me. Trevor Lawrence has to make at least one more play than Davis Mills, and Jacksonville should be able to win this football game.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. I always think from a head coaching standpoint, you want to have a number in mind that you feel like, okay, if we can hit this number, our win probability is 60% or higher. And I think for this game, to your point, if you're Liam Cohen, 17 points is probably the number that you need. So I would anticipate a pretty conservative game plan here. I mean, I would think it's run the ball, run the ball, run the ball, run some more. We saw in the first meeting, Houston came out in a different look. The Jaguars weren't prepared for, and they really stymied the run game in the first 30 minutes. Liam Cohen and his staff made adjustments. They ran for 75 yards in the second half in the win. I would think it's going to be a big dose of Etienne and Tootin and LaQuinn Allen against the Texans. How do you foresee Liam Cohen conjuring up an offensive game plan here?
It's really interesting. I'm a big fan of always looking at trends and different factors that come in, odds-wise. And Jacksonville's gone 8 consecutive games where they have faced a top 10 rushing defense and lost. Houston has gone 7 consecutive football games where they have ran the football against a top 10 rushing defense and lost. Right now, Jacksonville's 3rd against the run. Right now, Houston is 6th against the run. History tells us both teams end up losing this football game. That's obviously going to snap. I'm with you. I think it's a run and stop the run type of football game. This is a really good defense in Houston. They're number 1 in scoring. They're number 1 in total. They have 6. They're +6 in their turnover takeaway ratio, just 2 behind Jacksonville. I think this is one of these classic we'll check penalties. It's not going to look good on 3rd down. I don't think it's going to look particularly good in red zone, regardless of the amount of opportunities. I think when we review this, it'll be, well, this team made one more mistake than this team did make. And, Jacksonville, despite all the penalties this year, they seem to come out ahead in most of those situations. Let's set aside Cincinnati where they had the bad call. But, that's what I think this game is going to be. This could be a 2-hour and 15-minute game. I really think that both teams, Jacksonville ran it 42 times last week, 15 first downs rushing. That's the most this year in the NFL. So they're going to stay committed. It's a much better offensive line when they can rush the ball compared to when they're simply stuck in pass protection. So, yeah, I said 17 points last week. And again, I thought I was right on with that in the first half. And then things just went, crazy in the second half of play. But that's kind of the way I look at things. A very low-scoring game. And can any one of these two teams really set themselves offensively when it comes to rushing the football? And then you're going to need some spotty plays by your quarterback. You're going to have to hit a play here, hit a play there. And, but I keep waiting, and I think Jag fans keep waiting for one of these 300-yard, 3-touchdown games by Trevor Lawrence. I don't see that on Sunday. I see this like maybe 175 yards for Trevor Lawrence, hopefully a touchdown. That's kind of the way I think this game's going to go.
Yeah, I would agree. Jacob Simon's helping us out as always on Duval Rundown, and we certainly appreciate Jacob's brain power helping us out here. Jacob, let's say hello to our sponsor, please.
I'm Rick Ballou, Jacksonville Chrysler Jeep Dodge Ram Westside, proud partner of the Jaguars. Drive with confidence. Every new vehicle comes with our exclusive lifetime warranty. 7030 Commonwealth Avenue or online at jackswest.com.
Rick, I know you've had time to weigh in on Jakobi Meyers on Into the Night, but for the purposes of Duval Rundown, how do you anticipate Jakobi Meyers being utilized on Sunday? Because the early buzz is this guy is pretty damn cerebral as a player, that he's kind of gotten out there and quickly picked up what his role is. What's a fair expectation, and how much do you think we'll see him Sunday against Houston?
The first thing I did talk with a couple of people out in Las Vegas, even after the trade, certainly I did before the game, but after the trade, and he wanted out, but he wasn't a diva. He wasn't a malcontent. He let it be known that he didn't want to be a part of this organization, but had no effect with him on the field. It had no effect with him, in the locker room, which is very promising. I think this guy's going to do some dirty work for you. I really do. I think this is a guy that, he's never been fast. He ran a 4.63 8 years ago coming out of NC State. But he's a tough guy that does not drop the ball and is not afraid to go over the middle. So I think it's going to be a lot of 10-yard routes or less, finding a way to get him the football. I think it's very helpful that he spent the last couple of years with wide receiver coach Edgar Bennett. That's going to be big here. So there's little things that they have in their relationship. He's not going to come in here and know the entire route tree. Thought Liam Cohen once again was just phenomenal when it comes to transparency, talking about this. He could have given you just this and end of story, but no, instead he went on and talked about the X and the Y and the F version of wide receivers that this team runs, which is the slot, and how there's more pre-snap movement and how it's going to be really pretty complex to understand. The Liam Cohen offense, as you said, is totally different than what Meyers ran in New England and what he ran in Las Vegas. Yeah, he's a pro. And I really think he's going to be, brought up to speed as quickly as he possibly can. I think things will be somewhat limited, but I still expect him to be productive. I'm trying to remember who it was. Someone said to me this week, it might have been Hacker, would you be surprised if Jakobi Meyers leads the team in receiving on Sunday? And I was like, yeah, I would be surprised. I mean, he's been here for 3 days or whatever it is. But with, the latest going on here now with Thomas Jr. and Hunter out, I mean, if it's not Parker Washington, it may end up being Jakobi Meyers. But I'm very interested to see, how they use him. And again, I think there will be times where he will have the football thrown to him coming up this weekend.
So, Rick, you'll be in Houston, and we'll look forward to catching up with you Sunday morning on the kickoff show, and appreciate you doing that for us. How do you think the game plays out, and what kind of a game do you think we see, and what an opportunity for the Jaguars to go 3 games up on the Texans and basically end Houston's season, in my opinion?
I think most will wait till maybe the weekend, maybe Saturday, maybe even 90 minutes until kick, when the official injury report is there and we know who's playing, who's not playing. I've been a little bit ahead of it in this situation, as I mentioned a few minutes ago. I can't get past Davis Mills against Trevor Lawrence. I just can't. And I understand there's so much more goes into play in an NFL game, but And you know what you know, I was going to say I hate to do this and put it all on Trevor, but I don't hate to do this and put it on Trevor. He's being paid to win football games. You're going up against Davis Mills and Houston, okay? This is a very good defense, but this is absolutely an opportunity for Jacksonville to go on the road and win this football game. I think they're a better team than Houston. Houston leaves so much to be desired offensively, even though points per game, if you look at it, they're only one behind Jacksonville overall. I'm looking at the eye test. I've seen the way that they play. You know, the Texans are a good defensive team. There's no doubt about it. But to me, this is one of those games where you've got to put it on your franchise quarterback and say, you're taking on a backup, okay? A guy that's not supposed to be playing, and you are supposed to be one of the top quarterbacks in pro football. Go out there and win the game. So I think it's going to be very low scoring. Again, I said 17-14 a week ago. And, I was right for about 2.5 quarters, and it went nuts. I think 17 can win it again this week. I'm going to double down on, I'm going to say 17-10 Jacksonville over Houston.
Yeah, I like it. I foresee kind of the same game. I like the Jaguars for the reason that you mentioned. I think just Houston's offense already really shaky. We know they're not going to be able to block Josh Hines-Allen. We saw that in the first meeting. I think Trayvon Walker is rounding back into form, getting healthy. So I do think Houston's defense will dominate largely most of the day, but I think the Jaguars' defense could dominate the entire game. So I'm with you, and we don't even know if the Texans are going to have their kicker. So, that's another thing. You've got a guy on your side that can make it from 70 in a dome, and you're not really sure if it's Matthew Wright. We know about Matthew Wright. He's got a pop gun leg. I mean, he's not going to hit it from, more than 50, 51 yards. So, that's a 20-yard difference, and that could be the difference in the game. So I'll say special teams, ground game, and a really strong defensive effort lead the Jaguars to a victory. In Houston, they get the sweep. I think they basically eliminate the Texans at that point. And the Jaguars stay right in the race, getting ready for a monster game at home next Sunday against the Chargers. Rick, that's going to do it for us. So you'll be in Houston. We'll look forward to your coverage, and we'll look forward to catching up with you Sunday morning on the kickoff show. And Monday we'll be back for Duval Rundown. Frank Frangie will join me then. But until then, thank you so much for watching Duval Rundown. Have a great weekend, and go Jaguars.